Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa. Joining us is Reporters Without Borders, RSF's Secretary General, Christophe Deloire. Christophe, this week you announced the 2020 World Press Freedom Index. Give us the highlights.
Thanks, Maria. I'm so glad to speak with you. The 2020 edition of the World Press Freedom Index shows clearly that we are entering a decisive decade for journalism. The next 10 years will change the game for press freedom because of converging crises affecting the future of journalism. First, a geopolitical crisis due to aggressiveness of authoritarian regimes. Second, a technological crisis due to the lack of democratic guarantees in the digital space. Third, a democratic crisis, as we know, due to polarization and to new repressive policies in some democracies. Fourth, a crisis of trust due to suspicion and even sometimes hatred against journalists. And fifth, an economic crisis, impoverishing quality journalism. And this coronavirus crisis illustrates the negative factors. We have launched, as Reporters Without Borders, a monitoring tool, the Tracker 19. 19 refers, of course, to the coronavirus, but also to the Article 19 about freedom of opinion, an expression of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Have a look at it. We have discovered a lot of crazy stories. I would like just to highlight a few examples. North Korea, the worst country, ranked 180th in the World Press Freedom Index. The totalitarian government ensures the official number of cases of coronavirus remains 0, while at the same time, it has appealed to the international community for help in combating the pandemic. In the Philippines, in your country, Maria, ranked 136, the crisis has highlighted the main elements of the authoritarian course of taken by President Duterte. A new legislation gives the government powers to prosecute any reporter or news organization publishing a report that displeases the government. But the coronavirus pandemic does not only illustrate the crisis that affects the future of journalism, it is itself an exacerbating factor. It amplifies, it multiplies those crises. Economic crisis, for instance. Between 2008 and 2018, US media outlets have lost 25% of their staff, even 47% in the newspapers, newsrooms. And according to the New York Times, recently, since the arrival of the coronavirus, an estimated 33,000 employees of news media outlets have been laid off, furloughed, or had their pay reduced in the United States. In Liberia, really another type of country, ranked 95th in the World Press Freedom Index. Newspapers are not printed anymore since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. How will they survive? Falling sales, collapse in advertising revenue. It is not only an economic issue, it is clearly an issue of press freedom. Geopolitical crisis. Despite the huge responsibility that China bears regarding the control of news and information at the beginning of the epidemic, with all known consequences, Chinese authorities expelled 13 US journalists recently working for quality newspapers, and Chinese diplomats increase their attacks against journalists overseas. In Sweden, in France, in many countries, and China is ranked 177th in the World Press Freedom Index. In a statement published just after we published our World Press Freedom Index, a spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China said that we are biased. We are not. We just consider that we have to oppose to the new world media order that Beijing is trying to implement. Democratic crisis. There is a crackdown on media in despotic regimes, but also in some democracies, or former democracies, because some governments consider they can take advantage of the crisis. they implement the famous shock doctrine. As one of the worst examples, an Orwellian law has been adopted in Hungary, ranked 89 in the World Press Freedom Index. Donald Trump in the United States ranked 45th. This is a ranking of the country, not of Donald Trump. The ranking, Donald Trump would be worst. In the US with Trump, or in Brazil with Bolsonaro, and Brazil is ranked 107. Presidents increase their attacks against journalists, taking advantage of this crisis. In Slovenia, in Europe, a small countries ranked 32nd, our own correspondent, Blas Saka, has been targeted by a hate campaign fueled by the government after he sent an official Freedom of Information request on the COVID-19 to the authorities. In some countries, authorities enjoy the opportunities that demonstrations are not possible anymore in the streets. In a false democracy like Algeria, ranked 146, down 5 in the World Press Freedom Index, our own correspondent, Khaled Raheni, was put in jail 3 weeks ago. Of course, we are mobilized to get his release as soon as possible, but international pressure really will help. So please, if you can be of some help, support him. Finally, technological crisis. Sorry if I'm a bit long. The Director General of the World Health Organization, WHO, invented the word infodemic. Infodemic about the spread of false information regarding coronavirus, sometimes quicker than the virus itself. Infodemic is a consequence of the information disorder we live in. Disinformation and misinformation have been amplified. Yes, this COVID-19 crisis amplifies all the simultaneous crises that affect the future of journalism. So yes, the third decade of the 21st century will be a decisive one for journalism. What will journalism look like in 2030? We should not just answer this question. We should do our best. We have to do our best to amend, to improve the answer to this question. It is our duty to create the best possible answer. I think that we at RSF, we have positioned ourselves as a solutions provider. We have amended our strategy. We do not want to adapt to the world. We want to contribute to build it. Maria, you as a member of the International Commission of Information Democracy, we initiated altogether with 25 prominent figures from 18 countries, this commission, and we published together a declaration. And in this declaration, the preamble states, I quote, "Knowledge is necessary for human beings to develop their biological, psychological, social, political, and economic capacities." Biological and psychological capacities come first in this declaration. Right to information is inherent to the right to health, exactly what is today at stake. We succeeded to have 36 countries signing an intergovernmental partnership on information democracy based on our declaration. With 10 other organizations, we created a new entity, the Forum on Information Democracy, to implement this partnership. We also launched the Journalism Trust Initiative with 120 media outlets all over the world, unions, consumers associations, press councils. It aims at creating concrete incentives for the media outlets that comply with basic principles of journalism. We just now enter the implementation phase. So what I mean is that there are solutions. Those solutions have to be global, have to be structural. And we do believe that all those solutions, they can help change the game. We have to do to this. And I would like just to take a few seconds, if you agree, Maria, to thank all those who support us for doing this. We have to work all together. You embodied journalism. You embody, Maria, the defense of journalism. in the Philippines, of course, but all over the world. I can say this. I saw you in so many circumstances everywhere with your courage, with your determination. I would like to thank the RSF team, sections, offices, correspondents, partners. I would like to thank also our donors who make our work possible, and especially just after the release of this World Press Freedom Index, a foundation based in the Netherlands, DÉCENNIE, which has been supporting the development of the World Press Freedom Index for years. We will continue to develop it. And just as a conclusion, when we had this talk a few days ago, together with Joe Stiglitz, with Rana Ayoub, Edward Snowden, and you, Maria, Edward Snowden expressed something you must also remember. Edward is great for many reasons, including the clarity and the accuracy of his conception of the role of journalism. When he secreted his digital revelations about the NSA, he turned them over to Glenn Greenwald, this journalist who used to work with The Guardian. We know that Glenn remains under attack now in Brazil for his investigations. So I have a special thought for him. But what Edward said a few days ago, he said, I did it because I trusted journalists. I trusted journalists. Well, what a wonderful sentence in the world where we live in. So we can be optimistic, Maya, I think.
It was really incredible to listen to him also because he suffered so much, right? I mean, that 7 years ago, that mass surveillance, disclosing that now meant that he's in Moscow in exile and he can't go home. That respect for journalists, given the problems that we're facing, Christophe, this crisis of trust, which you mentioned, how will journalists deal with this, given all of the battlefronts that we're facing with? What advice would you give to journalists to try to regain and move away from the crisis of trust?
I think that we have to clarify something, is that when we defend press freedom, we do not defend journalists just for themselves, just because we would be a group with internal solidarity. This is not what is at stake. What is at stake is right to information. And right to information, considering that this information should be free, independent, realistic, trustworthy, is a right of human beings. And we can feel it with this crisis. Our health, even our lives are in danger if we cannot trust the information we get, whatever the source is. We need this right to information to be implemented as citizens, because otherwise, how can we scrutinize the decisions that are taken? How can we collectively, in our communities, in our countries, make appropriate decisions? And I would say that now we need this right to trustworthy news and information to be really implemented, because we need it also as a human community. Because none of the challenges of mankind will be solved without trustworthy news and information. Gender discrimination, corruption, or climate change, everything. For everything, we need this right really to be implemented. And I think that what we did together with this initiative on information democracy will be key. We have to build.
I think that was an incredible experience. It's a great initiative, Christophe. Thank you for leading that. And, you know, it set the stage for me that, you know, we really should be defining the principles and then rallying, because at that point, the biggest battle that we had was technology. We had given up our gatekeeping powers. Now, like you said, it's compounded. The problems have gotten worse, and we are giving more powers to authoritarian style leaders, to every leader around the world, to deal with the pandemic. How do you see this playing out? Can we take those powers back, given that the extraordinary measures are there for the virus?
Absolutely, we have to take this power back from despotic men, despotic leaders, also from private interests, the interests of the companies. This global information and communication space, when we talk all together, where we have disputes, debates, where we can to understand, we try to do our best. We do our best to understand the world. It is a common good of humankind. It cannot be just taken or dictated by a despotic guy. And so we have to set the rules. If we do not do this, in any case, somebody else will do it. And what we can notice now is that the guys who pass the laws, who set up the rules of the digital space, are either despotic guys or heads of companies with their private interests. So we have to set up the rules and, of course, defend all the people who embody our common ideals.
The Information and Democracy Commission, the initiatives that you're doing, is legislation is going for a global solution to these problems? Is legislation part of that?
You know what we say in the technological world, code is law. Yes, code is law. The guys who now are deciding what the algorithms are, they are like passing the laws. They do what normally democratic parliaments should do. But now they took this power. And we, as consumers, we accepted to delegate them the management of this space. So this is also our mistake. Something is very positive, of course, in the this digital space, a larger communication, but we have to address the problems. And in order to address the problems, there are two solutions. Either we address the symptoms, fight disinformation, political advertising during electoral campaigns, etc., or we address the causes. And the causes is that freedom of opinion and expression, which is protected by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was in the history of democracies implemented at the national level through constitutional guarantees, media laws, self-regulation of the media. And those safeguards, they have like exploded, swept away with the globalization and digitalization of the space. So we have to rebuild it. And that's what we started all together. And now we have the Forum on Information Democracy, which is this new entity, which is absolutely ready. And we are now working on the work plan, which is ready to give recommendations, set principles, to help have appropriate regulation and self-regulation of platforms. Because we need regulation, but we need good regulation. And the danger would be that some parliaments would take emergency measures, which would be very bad. So, and those topics, those issues are so complicated. The change of paradigm is so strong that if we do not have people from all over the world, lawyers, researchers in communication sciences, civil society representative, independent people, of course, if we do not have those people working together to try to answer the huge dilemmas we have in front of us regarding internet of things, regarding these new private messaging systems, but with huge potential, or just how algorithms function. We have to answer those questions. It's not easy. And that's why we have to work together, and that's exactly the purpose of this new governance that we are trying to set up, and which was imagined by you and our colleagues.
Well, you pulled together some amazing minds for that. Christophe, your last thoughts as you announced to the world the 2020 World Press Freedom Index.
That, as I mentioned, press freedom is not a luxury. It's not a luxury for journalists, and that we have now to work on the legitimacy of journalists, that we have to solve all the crises I spoke about. And one of the key crises is the crisis of trust. And to solve the crisis of trust, we have to prove as journalists that journalism is composed by rights and duties. And we not just demand rights for us. We also want to implement our duties. And our duties are an element of the rights. And the right to information is also built thanks to this. So I think this is this new period will be very interesting. It's a bit worrying, but if we are creative, if we accept to change our minds, I guess we will succeed.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christophe. More power to you. We must actually create it, right? We can't give up at this point in time. And thank you for all the work, RSF.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.